morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Dale Skaggs, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, and histories and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. We're very glad you've joined us today, and we invite our guests to fill out a welcome card, which you can find in the pew rack in front of you, and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back corner of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. And a fragrance-free area is located in the right front of the sanctuary here in the first few pews. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, which is noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name is Dale. You can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, I want to call your attention to a couple of those. Today's forum is titled, Why African Spirituality Makes Sense, presented by Patrick Bellegarde Smith, Professor Emeritus of African and African Diaspora Studies at UW-Milwaukee. The forum is in Max Otto Hall up on the second floor, and it starts at 10:10 a.m. Today is the last day to sign up for our child dedication ceremony, which takes place next Sunday, November 24. This simple ceremony is the Unitarian Universalist version of the traditional Christian baptism or christening, though the meanings we attach to it are significantly different. If you're interested in having your child dedicated, please call or email Sherry Wright at the church office, or you can fill out a form online today. Please find details on these and other announcements in the announcements insert. And finally, if you would, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our pulpit guest for today. Zister Alex Kapitan is a lay community minister, educator, editor, consultant, activist, and trans and queer lifelong Unitarian Universalist from Milwaukee. Z is the co-founder of the Transforming Hearts Collective, which does workshops, trainings, and consultancies with faith communities on radical welcome and other topics, and also the founder of Radical Copy Editor, a project that helps people use language in anti-oppressive ways. Alex worked for many years at the National Office of the Unitarian Universalist Association and is a member of the steering committee, a past member of the steering committee of Trust, an organization of trans UU religious professionals. Z now lives in Western Massachusetts with partner Teddy and a menagerie of furry and feathered friends. Join me in a warm welcome for Alex. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Our opening words come from the Reverend Teresa I. Soto, a UU non-binary minister and a dear friend of mine. Bring your broken hallelujah here. Bring your broken hallelujah here. Bring the large one that is beyond repair. Bring the small one that's too soft to share. Bring your broken hallelujah here. I know that people have told you that before you can give, you have to get yourself together. They overstated the value of perfection by a lot, or they forgot you are the gift. We all bring some broken things, songs and dreams and long-lost hopes. But here and together, we reach within. As a community, we begin again. And from the pieces, we will build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you.
And now let's join in our let's join in our opening hymn, number 1023 in the Teal hymnal, Building Bridges.
The story I have for you today is called Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson. That winter, snow fell on everything, turning the world a brilliant white. And one morning at school, as we settled into our seats, the classroom door opened and the principal came in. She had a girl with her, and she said to us, "This is Maya." Maya looked down at the floor. I think I heard her whisper, "Hello." We all stared at her. Her coat was open, and the clothes beneath it looked old and ragged. And her shoes were spring shoes, not meant for the snow, and one strap on them had broken. Our teacher, Miss Elbert, said, "Say good morning to our new student." But most of us were silent. The only empty seat was next to me, and so that's where the teacher put Maya. And on that first day, Maya turned to me and she smiled. But I didn't smile back. I moved my chair, myself, and my books just a little farther away from her. When she looked my way, I looked out the window at the snow. And every day after that, when Maya came into the classroom, I looked away, and I didn't smile back. My best friends that year were Kendra and Sophie, and at lunchtime we would walk around the schoolyard, our fingers laced together, whispering secrets in each other's ears. And one day, when we were just near the slide, Maya came over to us. She held open her hand to show us shiny jacks and a new tiny red ball that she had gotten for her birthday. "It's a high bouncer," she said, but none of us wanted to play. So Maya played a game by herself. That afternoon, when we got back into the classroom, Maya whispered to me, "Bet you can't guess who the new Jack champion of the world is." Behind me, Andrew whispered, "Chloe's got a new friend, Chloe's got a new friend." "She's not my friend," I whispered back. The weeks passed, and every day we whispered about Maya, laughing at her clothes, her shoes, the strange food she brought for lunch. And some days Maya would hold out her hand and show us something she had brought to school, a deck of cards, pickup sticks, a small tattered doll. But whenever she asked us to play, we said no. The days grew warmer and the pond thawed, and grass began growing where snow had once been. And one day Maya came to school wearing a pretty dress and fancy shoes, but the shoes and the dress looked like they belonged to another girl before Maya. "I have a new name for her," whispered Kendra. "Never knew. Everything she has comes from a secondhand store." We all laughed. Maya stood by the fence. She was holding a jump rope, but she didn't come over to ask if we wanted to play that day. After a while, she folded it double, rolled the ends around each hand, and just started jumping. She jumped around the whole schoolyard without stopping. She didn't look up, not once. She just jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped. The next day, Maya's seat was empty. In the classroom that morning, we were talking about kindness. Miss Albert brought a big bowl of water into the classroom, and we all gathered around her desk, and we watched her drop a little stone into it. And tiny waves rippled out, away from that stone. "This is what kindness does," Miss Albert said. "Each little thing we do, it ripples out into the world." Then Miss Albert let each of us drop a stone in and tell her one kind thing we had done. Joseph had held the door open for his grandmother. Kendra helped change her baby brother's diaper. Even mean old Andrew had done something. "I carried teacher's books up the stairs," he said. And Miss Albert said that that was true. But I stood there, holding Mrs. Albert's rock in my hand, silent. "Every small thing counts," Miss Albert said gently. But I couldn't think of anything, and so I passed the stone on. Maya didn't come to school the next day, or the day after that. And every morning I walked to school slowly, hoping that would be the day that Maya returned, and that she'd look at me and she would smile again. And I promised myself that this would be the day that I smiled back. "Each kindness," Miss Albert had said, "makes the world a little bit better." But Maya's seat remained empty. And one day, Miss Albert announced to the class that Maya would not be coming back. Her family had to move away, Miss Albert said, and she told us all to take out our notebooks, and it was time for spelling. That afternoon, I walked home alone. And when I reached the pond, my throat filled with all the things I wished I would have said to Maya. Each kindness I had never shown. I threw small stone into the pond over and over and over again, watching the water ripple out and away and out and away. Each kindness done and not done. Like every little girl somewhere, holding a small gift out to someone, and someone turning away from it. As I watched the water ripple, as the sun set through the maples, and the chance of a kindness with Maya, it just became more and more forever gone. The end. Let us rise in body and spirit for our next hymn. Number 311, Let It Be a Dance. Religious education, folks, after the first verse, if you would follow me out the side door, we have a lot of sandwiches to make today. A lot of kindness to give.
Dear friends, I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. I know I'm not the only one bringing a heavy heart with the weight of so much unspeakable violence and trauma and loss in the world this morning. This coming Wednesday is a day when my community, the trans community, mourns our dead. Those who have been brutally taken from us in the past year due to anti-trans violence. This Transgender Day of Remembrance, we will be honoring the memory of 331 reported trans people murdered around the world, including 36 here in the United States, the vast majority of whom are Black trans women. As we enter into a time of silence this morning, meditation or prayer together, followed by a seated singing of Spirit of Life, I want to offer these words from Mr. Barb Grieve, co-moderator of our Unitarian Universalist Association, a prayer for the lost ones. This is a prayer for the lost ones, those taken from us too soon and too many. The truth be told, one would be too many. One life taken is one too many to be dead. This is a prayer for those whose lives were taken in violence, for who they were and how they loved. Those who are no longer with us were people. They were our siblings and parents, our children, co-workers, and lovers. This is a prayer for their families, who will never know all who they were to become, nor never again feel their warm embrace. May their memories ease their grief. This is a prayer for the lost ones, beautiful human beings who once occupied this earth with beauty, humor, anger, frustration, and fear, and who are no longer with us. This is a prayer for those who are now our ancestors. We pray you continue to guide us towards making a more just, more loving, more accepting world. This is a prayer for the survivors of hate crimes and violence, for those who live in fear and cannot flourish as they are. This is a prayer for the survivors whose lives have been impacted by hate and violence. May we remember the legacy from which we come and the legacy we will leave behind. May we continue to build families of choice and protection for our souls as well as our bodies, trusting that we were always meant to be here and trusting that we are loved just as we are. Our reading today is written by Oriah Mountain Dreamer, and it's called The Invitation. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, yours or mine. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers, without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic. Remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling yourself is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it's not pretty every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't matter, it doesn't interest me to know who you know or how you came to be here. I messed that line up, I'm gonna say it again. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Thanks, Dale. Hi, I'm back. I'm so happy to be here. What a gift and a joy it is to share this space together this morning. Is there anyone else who's here for the first time today? Yay, I'm not alone. I'm actually from Milwaukee, but this is my first time actually here in this sanctuary. So I'm glad that there are other folks here for the first time. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. I want to tell you all a story about my parents. Is that cool? Yes. Great. So my parents joined UU Church West in Brookfield, which is my home church, in 1991 when I was 6. My dad, Eddie, is the son and grandson of Presbyterian ministers, and my mom, Lynn, was raised a devout atheist in small-town Wisconsin. The family joke is that when they joined a UU church, my dad's family all said, "Oh no, he's lost religion," and my mom's family all said, "Oh no, she's found religion." I think of my parents as the quintessential Unitarian Universalists. They came to this faith from previous spiritual paths, or the lack thereof, that didn't fit them. They are white and middle class and in their 60s, and they both have higher degrees. They are teachers and artists. My dad was an environmentalist way before it was cool, and considers nature his true spiritual home. They are well-traveled and well-read. They listen to NPR and read the New York Times and have season tickets to the Milwaukee Rep. They own 2 cars and a house in a suburb. They are politically active and vote Democrat. Sound familiar? I think of my home congregation, UU Church West, as the quintessential UU congregation as well. It's full of wonderful, kind people, most of whom are white and middle class and higher educated and politically liberal. Growing up, it was rare to hear words like God or prayer spoken in service. Church members did a volunteer shift at a soup kitchen downtown once a month and always turned out for the neighborhood river cleanup. They are very proud of the rainbow icon on their road sign and the solar panels that they were recently able to install, both of which ruffled feathers in Brookfield. I love my home congregation, and I'm so grateful that my parents joined it. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I was instilled with open-hearted curiosity about all the different religious paths and different truths that people hold. I was taught to honor my own truth, even or especially when that truth was different than what was expected. I internalized the idea that living our faith meant working to make the world a better place, bringing more life and love and justice into the world, fighting for those who are oppressed. And as a queer and trans person, I was able to grow up without any sense that these deep truths about myself were at odds with my faith. I don't carry the religious trauma that so many of my queer and trans friends do. I credit being raised UU to a large degree with my ability to be the person I am today, my full, authentic, queer, gender fluid, flamboyantly masculine and feminine, all at one time, neither here nor there, Mary Martin as Peter Pan, bow tie flashing, motorcycle riding, BOI boy self. But simply allowing me to exist and not actively making it harder for me to be myself in the world was not enough for me to feel a sense of unconditional welcome and belonging in my church as I grew into adulthood. Nor have I ever felt that way in any of the dozens of UU churches I've been to since. I've never felt like any of them were places where I could fully get my spiritual needs met. Why? I was raised here. This is my religion. You would think that those of us who are raised UU would be the ones who would feel most at home in this religion and in our churches, right? The truth is really hard to face. The vast majority of those of us who are raised in a UU church leave. Only 12.5% of the adult Unitarian Universalists in our congregations were raised UU. My parents' church is not my church. Why? Before I answer that question, I want to tell you a little bit more about my parents. I love my parents so much. They're actually coming to the 11 a.m. service. So if you want to meet them, you can stick around. They are wonderful parents. They certainly aren't perfect, but I have never questioned their love and care for me. And they have given me so much: a great childhood, a college education, and acceptance that has grown into appreciation for who I am as a person, even though I am not the person they expected when they were raising me, and the world I live in is completely different than theirs. When I was growing up, my parents' world was a reflection of themselves. Their friends were all people like them: teachers, artists, parents, people their age, their race, their class. Our church was a reflection of my parents' world as well. As the quintessential UUs, they fit right in. My mom talks of how freeing it was to come to church that very first time and hear a humanistic sermon that would have been considered blasphemous in the small town she grew up in. It was easy for them to feel a sense of total belonging, almost like this church had been made precisely with them in mind. As my sister and I became adults, it became clear that our parents expected our lives to look like theirs without ever being conscious of it. They had so many completely unconscious assumptions: that we would go on to get master's degrees, that we would own houses, be upwardly mobile, that we would have friends and partners who were people of particular races, classes, abilities, genders. Of course, they had these unconscious assumptions. They wanted the best for us based on what their own lives and cultural contexts had told them the best is. But my life and my sister's life don't look anything like our parents' lives. Our people are not their people. My sister married a wonderful man from Nicaragua who immigrated to Wisconsin to be with her. Spanish is the primary language in their home. Theirs is a multiracial, multilingual community of friends and a huge, vibrant, extended Nicaraguan family. My community is also a multiracial, multilingual one, a community of queer and trans people of many faiths, many ages, many abilities. Like my brother-in-law, my partner is also working class. He's a generation older than me, and queer and trans and in recovery, and a long-term survivor of AIDS. Our community, our given and chosen family, bridges almost every facet of difference that I can imagine. It's hard for any parent to let go of that framed picture that grows in the mind's eye of what that child's life will be like. It was particularly hard for my parents to grasp that their experience of the world does not translate to the lives of their children. That in order to understand our lives and be in real relationship with us, they had to let go of the things that life had taught them about who and what is most valuable, what is most worth striving for, what success looks like, what the best for their children is, and get curious about what our worlds are like, what our needs are, what's true for us, what brings us life. At a certain point in time, I had to sit my parents down and say, look, I want a real relationship with you. And I know you want a real relationship with me. And in order for that to happen, I need you to stop making assumptions and start asking questions. I said to them, this is way bigger than respecting my name and my pronouns. Calling me by the name and pronouns that feel best to me is a bare minimum for us staying in each other's lives. Because if you aren't willing to do what's necessary in order for me to stay present and not dissociate when I'm around you, there's nowhere we can go from here. But if we are going to be more than people who are simply able to share space, if we are going to have a real relationship, I need you to do more than merely respect the language I use for myself. I need you to be curious about why I use that language. I need you to be curious about my life and my partner's life, how it is different from yours, what a difference those differences make. I need you to respect my truths and my needs. If you can't do this, we can still talk and see each other, but we are going to be people who talk about the weather, not people who are in real relationship. Because we are so different, real relationship takes more than just being friendly to each other. It takes actively engaging with our difference from an open-hearted place and being willing to do the hard work of unpacking and unlearning our assumptions. My parents never really thought about what would happen after their children grew up. They didn't have great relationships with their own parents, so they didn't have good models for how to imagine or plan for what it would be like to have good relationships with their adult children themselves. I think Unitarian Universalism is the same way. I don't think Unitarian Universalism has ever truly thought about what would happen after its children grew up. If the quintessential UU, like my parents, came here from somewhere else, they might not have good models for how to be a religion whose children don't leave. Did you get that? I'll say it again. If most UUs come here from somewhere else, they might not know how to create churches whose children don't leave. They know how to create children. They don't know how to create churches whose children don't leave. Beyond that, they might not know what it would be like to create a religious community where people who are different from them don't leave. It's not that our churches aren't welcoming. Of course they are. As a young, queer, trans, raised UU, I absolutely feel like I can come through the doors of any UU church and be given a warm smile and a hymnal and a place to sit. I know I won't be told I'm going to hell or be expected to believe something I don't believe, and I'm reasonably sure that no one will be actively awful to me because of who I am or how they perceive me. There's no understating how important this is. It's deeply meaningful. I can't tell you what it means as a queer and trans person to have been raised in a faith tradition where people like me weren't condemned. But the promise of not being told I'm going to hell isn't enough to make me want to come to church every week. It takes a little more than basic human decency for me to want to show up, get out of bed, leave my couch with my corgi, and actually get my spiritual needs met. I love my corgi. The only time I have ever gotten the feeling of radical welcome, unconditional affirmation, and deep spiritual connection in UU spaces was when I was a teenager. Things were hard as a teen. I didn't have language yet to describe who I was to myself or to anyone else. I struggled with depression and anxiety. UU Youth Space was my saving grace. We didn't always get it right, but in those spaces, I truly felt the saving power of this faith. There were three things that were constants when we worshiped. We co-created it, we worshiped in the round, and oral tradition songs provided the bedrock. When we got together, someone would say, okay, who wants to go plan worship? And a bunch of people would go off and make a plan together collaboratively. We always worshiped in a circle with a chalice at the center, and we usually sat on the ground or got close or held hands. We sang. We never once used a hymnal or a piano. No shade. But we didn't use it. We sang rounds and counterpoints and made up harmonies, and no one ever knew when the song would end. It just ended when it was done. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine worshiping that way? How embodied it was. It wasn't about thinking. It was about feeling and being together. Can you imagine what it was like for me to supposedly grow up and be expected to worship with the adults, with their rows of chairs and their hierarchical leadership and their hymnals and their orders of service? No shade. I'll never forget being 17 years old when the youth group was invited to do a youth-led service. All we wanted to do was put the chairs in a circle, because that was how we worshiped. We couldn't do it any other way. And mind you, this was UU Church West, not First Church. The seats are not nailed to the floor. But someone said no. There was an unwillingness to embrace change, even for 1 single Sunday. There was an unwillingness to do something different, something possibly uncomfortable, in service of us and our gifts. A few years back, I heard UU minister Reverend Rob Hardy's preach on the topic, willing to be changed by what we've started, a line from one of our hymns. And I was immediately transported back to being 17 and feeling that sense of rejection over the damn chairs. I thought to myself, what if the youth knew something more deeply about what it means to be UU and practice Unitarian Universalism than the adults who found this faith later in life? What if those of us who were raised here understood something deeper and more true about this religion and were just waiting for the chance to share it and take all of us to the next level? We have to be willing, not just to welcome change, but to be changed, to transform. I'm not 17 anymore, and there are a lot more reasons than chairs in rows now that keep me from finding a congregational home. Being young and queer and trans and raised UU doesn't just mean I have particular needs around gender and sexuality and age. It's not just about pronouns and bathrooms and rainbow flags. That's the bare minimum. Being young and queer and trans and raised UU means my cultural context is different than the culture of the average UU church. Being young and queer and trans affects everything for me. My understanding of family, my relationship to social justice, the ways I build community, my sense of spirituality, my spiritual needs, my spiritual gifts. In order for me to feel radical welcome, in order for me to feel home in a church, even the church of my birth, that church must be willing to not just change, but be changed. Evolve, be transformed. In order to stay in real relationship with their children, my parents had to let go of what was comfortable and familiar for them. If they wanted us to be more than people who talked about the weather and other purely superficial topics, they had to be willing to get really uncomfortable. Recognize that they didn't have a map for where they were going, that they didn't know the path, and that was okay. They had to recognize that things that had worked for them in their lives didn't work for their children. They had to get curious about the difference that our differences make. Are you curious about the difference that our differences make here in this congregation? Crickets. Don't scare me like that. Thank you. Do you want to know a secret that really shouldn't be a secret? Thank you. Difference is Unitarian Universalism's superpower. It's true. Think about it. Within Unitarian Universalism, we are different from one another in ways that are really rare for people who share a religion. Belief. In this very room, there is somebody who worships the natural world, somebody who believes in incarnation, somebody who speaks to the ancestors, someone who believes in a scientific method, someone whose holy texts are the Bible, the Quran, and Mary Oliver complete works of poetry. In this room, there is someone who believes in a single God, someone who believes in many gods, and someone who believes in no God. Just think, there are quite likely as many unique beliefs and understandings of the world and our place in it as there are people in this room. This, my friends, is our greatest uniqueness and our greatest strength. In our world today, we desperately need communities like ours, communities of people who build bridges across the sort of lines of difference that we have been taught make it impossible for people to understand each other, break bread together, love each other. But in order for Unitarian Universalism to tap into its superpower and live into its potential, the potential to form communities in which people engage with deep difference, not just belief, but also sexuality, gender, race, class, ability, age, politics, and more, we have to be willing to be transformed by our relationships across lines of difference. The beauty and the pain of parenting is that you pour everything you have, everything you know, your lifeblood, your soul, into this small, growing being. You're willing to do anything for them, whatever it takes, and you have no idea where this being will end up, what they will do, who they will be. But you give of yourself anyway. You sacrifice for them anyway. What and who are you willing to sacrifice for? Are you willing to sacrifice in service of this community, the children and the youth, and all of the other precious souls here? Are you willing to put yourself on the line? Are you willing to give something up? Some time, some comfort, some binary understanding or baked-in assumption about how the world works, so that someone else can be here and stay here? Yes. Thank you. I hope so. I'm not trying to force you to, agree to do something here, but I will tell you that after I had that conversation with my parents about what it was going to take for us to have a real relationship across our lines of difference, I'm really happy to say that they embraced the challenge. Thank goodness, because they're going to be here, right? It would be super awkward if they were like, oh my God, we haven't done that. They have. It has not been easy. There is nothing comfortable about it. It is scary and painful and risky, but I can tell you that it's worth it. And we are all being transformed because of our willingness to sacrifice. You see, when you're in relationship across lines of difference, it expands your world. In order to get there, we had to get really real with each other and get really vulnerable and take some risks. I had to understand where my parents were coming from, the fears they have, the trauma they are carrying. They had to understand more deeply the struggles I was facing, the work that it took for me to keep showing up, the things that were getting in the way of me sharing deeply with them. But once we did, our worlds grew bigger and more vibrant. It's not just that we get to have real and meaningful relationships now. It's also that our perspectives on the world have grown. It's really beautiful. Are you willing to be changed by what you've started here? Are you willing to make sacrifices in service of this community? Are you willing to have faith in those who bring a different perspective on Unitarian Universalism, whether that perspective is grounded in belief, religion of origin, age, race, class, or any number of other experiences of the world? Yes. Yay. I'm so glad. Everything you are, everything that is best about this beautiful community that you have built here so far is the result of hard work, deep love, vision, and faith. What you've done here is amazing. And what's even more amazing is that you've laid the groundwork for what is next. My parents did a pretty great job raising two pretty awesome kids and setting us up for success in life. They ushered us into the world, and then they recognized that pouring so much of them into us didn't mean that they owned us or were entitled to direct our lives. They are learning how to be curious. They are learning how to be transformed by us and by our relationship. What would that look like here at First Church? What would it look like to engage with the differences that exist here and learn together what transformation might look like? What would it look like to hand the baton to those who can take the vision that you've had here even further to the next level? In my home church 18 years ago, being willing to be transformed would have meant not just putting the chairs in a circle for one service, but putting the chairs in a circle regularly. It would have meant not just inviting the youth to lead service once a year, but inviting youth to serve on the worship committee and transforming the entire practice of worship. Learning how those who have been raised UU worship and recognizing that as a deep and true expression of Unitarian Universalism. This sort of transformation is a tall order. It's not easy. It's not safe. It's not comfortable. And in order to heal our world, it's necessary. I firmly believe that this is the place where we can practice this. Because engaging with difference is a spiritual practice. Practice means making mistakes. Practice means getting messy and being vulnerable. Practice means taking risks and trying new, uncomfortable things and getting them wrong and trying again and again, because our world needs us to, because we need each other to. So, what can you do to embrace transformation? What is the next way that you can expand the circle of inclusion and belonging? What can you do to learn and share more about the differences that exist here, but have stayed hidden beneath expectations about who's here and who's not? We are called, as Unitarian Universalists, to be more than simply friendly and good people. We are called to practice transformation through relationship and to take that practice out into the world. So, thank you for joining me in that practice, because it is truly one of the most holy, life-changing, and world-changing things that we can do together. Amen, Ashe, Aho, and blessed be.
Every week, we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all the non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization, and in this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with Believe in Students Fast Fund. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now be gratefully received. Please, excuse me, please rise in body or spirit and join in our responsive reading printed in your order of service. I will begin. We would go deeper.
We would become selves we cannot even imagine today.
We would become courageous.
We would grow to life in congregations filled with different perspectives.
We would know unutterable joy.
We would be filled with gratitude.
May we go deeper.
May our time together open our hearts and sharpen our minds.
May our learning know no end.
May we find the sacred within and around us.
May we see the beauty in each other's faces. May we find our way to the depth of our being and there know holiness. Now please join in our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.